Hello and welcome to the World War Lab channel. Today, we dive into a story where history, courage, and truth collide in the skies of World War II. What you're about to hear is not just a tale of aerial combat, but of shattered myths, broken barriers, and a moment when ideology was forced to face reality. July 2nd, 1943, Castel Vetrono Airfield, Sicily. The pilot of Focke-Wulf 190 never noticed a P-40 Warhawk diving down from above until the burst of machine gun fire ripped through his fuselage, sending his aircraft spiraling helplessly toward the Sicilian countryside below. First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana, had just achieved something German Luftwaffe commanders believed was impossible. A black pilot had destroyed one of their elite fighter planes. The swastika painted on Hall's P-40L Warhawk that afternoon would mark the first of 112 enemy aircraft destroyed by the men the Germans would reportedly come to call Schwarzvogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. In Nazi Germany, racial doctrine classified black people as unmentioned, subhuman, supposedly incapable of mastering complex machinery or showing bravery in combat. The Nuremberg laws had outlawed marriages between Germans and people of African descent. Yet here, in the skies above the Mediterranean, that ideology was about to collide catastrophically with reality, as 992 highly trained pilots from Tuskegee, Alabama, would methodically dismantle both German aircraft and German assumptions of racial superiority. What the Luftwaffe pilots did not realize as they climbed to intercept American bombers in 1943 was that they were about to face some of the most rigorously trained and intensely motivated fighter pilots in the entire United States Army Air Forces. These were men who had overcome obstacles their white counterparts never had to face, who trained longer and harder than standard pilots, and who entered battle carrying not only the responsibility of national service, but also the crushing burden of proving the worth and capability of an entire race. The mathematics of aerial combat would soon be written across the skies of Europe. 15,000 combat sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 confirmed aerial victories, and a bomber escort loss rate significantly lower than that of white fighter groups. These were statistics powerful enough to force even the most fanatical Nazi ideologues to confront the collapse of their racial theories. But the road to that first aerial victory did not begin in combat. It began in the hostile environment of segregation in America itself. In 1925, the U.S. Army War College had released a report titled Employment of Negro Manpower in War, which concluded, compared to the white man, he is admittedly of inferior mentality. He is inherently weak in character. This official military assessment claimed that black soldiers lacked the intelligence for technical roles and the courage required for combat leadership. Yet even while military leadership clung to such prejudices, a small group of black Americans was already proving them wrong. Eugene Bullard had flown combat missions for France during World War I because the United States refused to allow him to serve. Bessie Coleman had earned her pilot's license in France in 1921 after no American flight school would accept her. By the 1930s, the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago had trained dozens of black civilian pilots, clearly demonstrating that skill in flight knew no racial boundaries. As war clouds gathered over Europe, the pressure for change intensified. Civil rights leaders such as Walter White of the NAACP, labor leader A. Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hastie lobbied relentlessly for black inclusion in military aviation. Black newspapers like the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, and the Baltimore Afro-American relentlessly challenged the Roosevelt administration with a single, powerful question: how could America claim to fight for democracy abroad while denying it home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 finally forced open the door. Senator Harry H. Schwartz had added an amendment requiring the civilian pilot training program to include one or more schools designated by the Civil Aeronautics Authority for the training of black air pilots. It was a reluctant concession wrapped in segregation, but it marked the beginning of real change. When Franklin D. Roosevelt sought an unprecedented third term in 1940, he needed the support of black voters in key northern cities. On January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson announced the creation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. The announcement, however, came with a revealing caveat. This squadron would be an experiment, meant to test whether black men could truly be trained as combat pilots. Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. understood the immense weight of command when he led 26 pilots of the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. The son of America's first black general, Davis had endured 4 years of enforced silence at West Point, where no white cadet would speak to him except for official duties. Now, he commanded men who carried not only their own dreams, but the hopes and expectations of 13 million black Americans. The 99th arrived at Farjuna, Tunisia, and was attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Momeyer, a commander who made no effort to hide his skepticism toward black pilots. Momeyer assigned them patrol missions over the Mediterranean, deliberately keeping them away from what he considered the real action of the war. He wanted them to fail, and when they did not immediately shine, he finally had the excuse he was looking for. The morning of June 2nd, 1943 marked their first true combat mission, an attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. As their worn and weathered P-40 Warhawks climbed toward their targets, German fighters suddenly appeared in the sky. The Tuskegee pilots held their formation tightly, staying with their bombers and refusing to scatter. No aircraft were lost on either side that day, but the Germans had learned their first important lesson. These pilots would not break under pressure. But it was July 2nd, 1943 that changed everything. Charles Hall was flying his 8th mission, escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers attacking Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily. 2 Focke-Wulf 190s swept down toward the bomber formation. Hall later testified, "I saw 2 Focke-Wulfs following the bombers just after the bombs were dropped. I headed for the space between the fighters and the bombers and managed to turn inside the Jerry's aircraft. I fired a long burst and saw my tracers penetrate the second plane. He was turning to the left, but suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground. When Hall landed, the entire base erupted. Black ground crews, who had endured months of insults and doubt from white personnel, finally had their answer to every slight and every insult. Hall's victory became the first aerial kill by a black American pilot in U.S. military history. By January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been in combat for 7 months. Yet Colonel Momeyer filed a devastating report claiming they lacked aggressiveness and recommending their removal from combat operations. The report reached General Henry Hap Arnold, who began preparations to shut down the entire experiment. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, the Luftwaffe launched massive raids against Allied forces at the Anzio beachhead. 15 pilots of the 99th, flying outdated P-40s, encountered superior Focke-Wulf 190s over the battlefield. What followed would silence critics forever. The 99th shot down multiple enemy aircraft, with estimates ranging from 8 to 13 kills over 2 days. Captain Charles Hall claimed 2 more victories, bringing his personal total to 3. In just 2 days, flying inferior equipment, they destroyed more enemy aircraft than they had in their previous 7 months of combat combined. The War Department launched a study comparing the 99th with other P-40 squadrons and concluded that they were performing just as well as white units. The success at Anzio proved that black pilots could excel in combat when given a fair opportunity. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group, combining the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons, received orders that would transform them from overlooked outsiders into legends. They would join the 15th Air Force as bomber escorts, flying long and deadly missions deep into Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin Davis gathered his pilots at Ramitelli Airfield on Italy's Adriatic coast and delivered words that would define their entire combat philosophy. "We cannot afford to lose bombers," he told them. "Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home." From that moment on, their mission was clear: Stay with the bombers no matter what. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining ordered a standardized marking system for all fighter groups, giving each one distinctive colors for instant recognition. The 332nd was assigned red, not just red noses or small markings, but entire tail sections painted a deep crimson. The P-51 Mustangs, with their red tails, red propeller spinners, and red nose bands, became impossible to miss in the sky. The first bomber crews to receive red tail escorts did not even know their protectors were black. They only knew that these fighters stayed close, never abandoning them for easy victories. Word quickly spread to the bomber groups. Request of red tails if you could get them. July 18th, 1944 would test the red tails like never before. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs to rendezvous with bombers targeting the Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany. The bombers were late, and Davis made a crucial decision. Instead of returning to base, he ordered his pilots to orbit in enemy territory. When the bombers finally appeared, so did the Luftwaffe, with approximately 100 German fighters attacking from multiple directions. The Germans had learned that only overwhelming numbers might break the protective screen of the Red Tails. Despite fierce resistance by the 332nd, who claimed between 11 and 12 victories, 15 B-17 bombers were shot down in just 20 minutes of brutal combat. The 332nd lost 3 pilots, Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Critics immediately claimed that the high bomber losses proved black pilots could not handle major air battles. But operational analysis revealed a different truth. The 332nd had arrived to find the bombers already engaged by massive German forces. They had not caused a disaster. They had prevented a complete catastrophe. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe's conventional fighters could barely challenge Allied air supremacy. But Germany still held one last card. The Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. The fighter was unlike anything the Allies had faced before. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, it could outrun any propeller-driven aircraft in the sky. On March 24, 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group received what would become its most challenging assignment. They were ordered to escort bombers on a 1,600-mile round-trip mission to Berlin to attack the Daimler-Benz tank factory. Intelligence reports warned that Me-262 jet fighters from Jag Eschwader 7 would be defending the target. Colonel Davis led 43 P-51 Mustangs directly into the heart of the Reich. As they approached Berlin, the Me-262s appeared, forming the largest concentration of jet fighters ever assembled for a single interception. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown had studied the jet's weaknesses carefully. We knew the German jets were faster than we were. Instead of going directly after them, we went away from them and then turned into their blind spots, he explained. Brown shot down one Me-262, reporting, I pulled up at him in a 15-degree climb and fired 3 long bursts from about 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock to him. Almost immediately, the pilot bailed out from around 24,500 feet. Lieutenant Earl Lane achieved what many believed was impossible, destroying a Me-262 with a 2,000-yard deflection shot using the new K-14 computing gun sight. Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed the 3rd jet victory that day. The destruction of 3 Me-262s in a single engagement represented more jet fighters than most Allied groups would destroy during the entire war. In one afternoon, the Red Tails had surpassed the total number of all previous American Me-262 kills combined. For this mission, the 332nd Fighter Group earned a Distinguished Unit Citation. Not every encounter between the Tuskegee Airmen and the Germans ended in victory. 32 pilots became prisoners of war, and their experiences revealed the complicated relationship between Nazi ideology and military reality. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944, during his 19th mission. His P-51 was hit by flak over southern France while he was strafing radar installations. At his interrogation, Jefferson discovered that the German officer possessed extensive intelligence on the 332nd Fighter Group. The interrogator had information about Ramitelli Airfield, about our squadron commanders, even details about my parent home in Detroit. Jefferson later recalled, "He knew my father was a teacher and even my mother's maiden name. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough." Inside Stalag Luft 3, Jefferson found himself treated like any other American officer. White prisoners from bomber crews often approached him with gratitude for protection the Red Tails had provided. Interactions that were impossible in segregated America happened naturally inside a German prison camp. The irony was impossible to ignore. "Here I was in a Nazi POW camp," Jefferson said, "being treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home." When the war ended and Jefferson returned to the United States, he was immediately subjected to segregation at the point of disembarkation. While German pilots reportedly acknowledged the Red Tail skill with the nickname Schwarzvogel mentioned, the Black Birdmen, American bomber crews became their most passionate defenders. These men, who faced death on every mission, cared nothing about race. They cared only about survival. Bomber crews developed their own mythology around the Red Tails. Stories spread about their distinctive flying style, the way they waggle their wings in greeting, their tight formations, and their refusal to abandon damaged bombers. Red Tail Angels became the name many bomber crews used for them. The statistics supported this reputation. Research by Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Hallman revealed that bombers escorted by the 332nd Fighter Group lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters, compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups in the 15th Air Force. This superior protection rate was achieved even though the Red Tails flew some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the war. By the end of the conflict, the Tuskegee Airmen had compiled a combat record that shattered every pre-war assumption about black military capability. Combat operations totaled 1,578 missions flown, with more than 15,000 individual sorties completed. They conducted 179 bomber escort missions and 311 total missions for the 15th Air Force. Enemy aircraft destroyed included 112 confirmed kills in aerial combat and 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 3 Mi-262 jet fighters were shot down on March 24, 1945. Ground targets destroyed included 950 rail cars, trucks, and motor vehicles, along with 254 locomotive engines. The former Italian destroyer Giuseppe Missouri was damaged beyond repair on June 25, 1944. Their protection record showed only 27 bombers lost to enemy fighters under their escort, compared to an average of 46 for other fighter groups, a superior rate maintained across 179 escort missions. Individual achievements further illustrated their effectiveness. Lee Archer recorded 4 confirmed aerial victories. Joseph Ellsbury achieved 4 victories, including 3 FW-190s on July 12, 1944. Edward Toppins also scored for victories. Clarence Lucky Lester achieved 3 kills in a single mission on July 18, 1944. The decorations they earned spoke for themselves. Pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group received 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 744 Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, and 8 Purple Hearts. The 99th Fighter Squadron was awarded 3 Distinguished Unit Citations, and the 332nd Fighter Group received one of its own. The human cost was heavy. 66 pilots were killed in action, 32 were captured and became prisoners of war. 84 more lost their lives in training accidents and non-combat missions. The transformation from mockery to respect was not only about courage. It reflected superior American training methods and the technological advantages that the Red Tails used with precision and discipline. At Tuskegee, pilots flew more hours than their white counterparts, roughly 300 hours compared to about 200 for white pilots. They practiced formation flying relentlessly, knowing that discipline in the air would be their greatest advantage in combat. The washout rate at Tuskegee reached 60%, compared to about 40% for white cadets. Only the very best survived the program, creating what Colonel Noel Parrish, commander at Tuskegee, called a super-selected group. The progression of aircraft types told its own story. The 99th began with hand-me-down P-40 Warhawks that were already obsolete when they arrived in North Africa. These liquid-cooled Allison engine fighters were inferior to German Bf-109s and FW-190s in almost every performance category. Yet the Tuskegee pilots learned to exploit the P-40's strengths, its superior turning ability and rugged construction, to survive and fight effectively. The arrival of the P-51 Mustang in July 1944 transformed the Red Tails into equals of any fighter unit in the war. The North American P-51D Mustang represented American industrial perfection. Its Packard-built Merlin engine gave it a top speed of about 437 miles per hour. Its 6.50 caliber machine guns could destroy any enemy aircraft. Most importantly, its range, more than 1,600 miles with drop tanks, allowed it to escort bombers anywhere deep inside the Reich. Behind every pilot who shot down a German aircraft stood dozens of support personnel, mechanics, armorers, and crew chiefs who kept the Red Tails flying. Of the roughly 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen who served, fewer than 1,000 were pilots. The rest were the unsung heroes who made victory possible. The ground crews worked what could only be described as miracles with limited resources. Ramitelli Airfield in Italy was primitive compared to other American bases. Spare parts were scarce, and the 332nd was often last in line for supplies. Yet their aircraft availability rate, the percentage of planes ready for combat, equaled or even exceeded that of white units. These ground crews also faced danger. German raids on Ramitelli were rare but deadly. On March 24, 1944, a German bombing attack killed several support personnel. Even under fire, the men continued working, pulling aircraft away from burning fuel dumps and preventing far greater destruction. The strategic bombing campaign over Europe became the ultimate testing ground for Tuskegee Airmen. Each B-17 Flying Fortress cost about $238,000 and carried 10 highly trained crew members. The loss of a single bomber represented a strategic setback that echoed through the entire war effort. This was why bomber protection mattered more than individual aerial victories. Colonel Davis understood this deeply when he ordered his pilots to resist the temptation to chase German fighters. Anyone can shoot down a fighter if they abandon their post, he said. It takes discipline to stay with the bombers when the enemy is running. The Red Tails' escort tactics evolved through experience. They developed a three-layer defense system: close escort weaving directly above the bombers, medium escort positioned to intercept incoming fighters, and high escort watching for diving attacks from above. This system demanded precise coordination and absolute discipline. The Tuskegee Airmen were fighting two wars at the same time, one against fascism overseas and another against racism at home. Their combat record challenged both Nazi racial ideology and American segregation, proving that excellence in aerial warfare transcended racial categories. While they battled the Luftwaffe abroad, they fought prejudice at home. Their victories made headlines in black newspapers, but were often minimized or ignored by the mainstream press. The Pittsburgh Courier's Double V campaign, Victory Against Fascism Abroad and Victory Against Racism at Home, used the Tuskegee Airmen as powerful examples of what that struggle meant. The contrast with German awareness was striking. By 1945, the Luftwaffe reportedly knew exactly who flew the red-tailed Mustangs, referring to them as Schwarz-Vogelmännchen, the Black Birdmen. Meanwhile, many white Americans still did not even know that black fighter pilots existed. This ignorance was not accidental. The War Department rarely publicized the Tuskegee Airmen's successes. Victory in Europe did not bring celebration for them, but uncertainty. While white units prepared for parades and recognition, the 332nd faced questions about their future. The Army Air Force's plan to maintain segregation, despite all the combat evidence proving its absurdity. For decades after World War II, the achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen remained largely unknown to mainstream America. Many individual pilots struggled with this erasure. Lee Archer, who had scored 4 aerial victories, went on to work as a corporate executive but rarely spoke about his wartime record. "Nobody believed me anyway," he once said. "A black fighter pilot must be lying." In 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially integrating the United States military. That historic decision was influenced in no small part by the combat performance of the Tuskegee Airmen and the undeniable proof they had provided. Benjamin Davis, the man who had led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the U.S. Air Force's first black general in 1954. Even so, recognition came slowly. It was not until 2007 that President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Tuskegee Airmen. Only about 300 of the original pilots were still alive to attend the ceremony. Many had waited more than 60 years for national acknowledgement of what they had accomplished. The transformation from mockery to respect was not a myth. It was documented, measurable fact. The numbers remained irrefutable. 112 aerial victories against the Luftwaffe. 3 Me, 262 jet fighters destroyed in a single mission. 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground. Only 27 bombers lost under their protection compared to an average of 46 for other escort groups. 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses awarded to pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group, the unit the Germans reportedly called the Schwarz-Vogelmännchen, the Black Birdmen, proved that prejudice collapses when confronted with undeniable ability. Every German fighter shot down, every bomber brought home, every mission completed added weight to an unavoidable truth. The color of a pilot's skin had nothing to do with his skill, his courage, or his ability to fight and win. Roscoe Brown, who had shot down a German jet over Berlin, later summarized their achievement with simple clarity. "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen had not merely won aerial engagements. They had changed history. They fought 3 wars at the same time and emerged victorious in all of them, defeating the Luftwaffe in combat, shattering Nazi racial ideology through performance, and helping to dismantle American segregation through undeniable excellence. When given the opportunity, the Tuskegee Airmen soared, transforming mockery into respect, prejudice into acceptance, and enemies into witnesses of their extraordinary achievement.